You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks for adventuring with us as we discover what incredible athletes and outdoor enthusiasts are doing all over the world. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Well, hello, friends. Thank you for joining the Adventure Sports Podcast today. I have Josh Sprague with us, and we're going to be talking about adventure racing and gravel biking. And I do want to get into an adventure that he shared with me beforehand, Falcon Lake. This is one of those, boy, it's almost a survival and real life story that's worth hearing because I think we can learn from it. But anyway, Josh, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on. Can't wait to talk about fun, random things.
Yeah, man. First of all, where are you right now? Where are you calling?
Liberty Hill, Texas. Basically Austin, Texas.
Austin. Man, that is a popular place these days.
Yeah. It's awesome here. I can't complain. It is fantastic weather, good food, good people. Traffic's not too bad out here on the edge of town. We still got country. We got everything you can imagine close by.
Nice. Well, and you mentioned that you moved down there from Colorado. I don't hear that a lot. What drove that?
Well, so when we started Orange Mud, we were actually in California. And when my wife and I both quit our day job and we could go anywhere, it was either we lived in Arizona before California, and we went to California as a result of the company I was running out there. And we got used to dry weather, low bugs, sunny skies. And so there weren't a lot of other places we wanted to go besides Colorado, which in theory has more sunshine than anywhere else, because that's what they say, but that's a lie. They may get sun at some point during the day, but there's often clouds and whatnot.
You're going to get sun and rain.
Yeah, sun, rain, snow, ice, and it could be 90
every day.
And 20 in the same day. And so yeah, that's where we pushed harder to Colorado. But I've always loved Austin. And so we did a 3-year stint in Colorado, and it was great, but we didn't like the cold as much. So 3 years in, I was down here in Texas on a wild pig hunting trip, riding my mountain bike and hunting with bow and arrow and finding arrowheads and goofing off and getting a sunburn over spring break. And I told my wife on like the 4th day of the trip, I said, this week I shot a big boar. I mountain biked 160 miles. I got a suntan. Meanwhile, she's in a foot of snow back home. And I said, we should move to Texas. And she's like, you better not be kidding. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And before I got home, the house was packed. And like completely packed. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, God dang, we got to freaking at least make the house look presentable to be able to freaking list it and sell it. And I got to find a place for our business. I got to buy a house. I'm like, there's a whole bunch of series that has to happen.
And she was ready.
That was like March 20th. And by June 3rd, we moved into our warehouse in Round Rock, Texas. And June 20th, I think it was, we moved into our new house out here in Georgetown, Liberty Hill area. And been here ever since 19. Yeah, and we love it. It's just the greatest place.
So where were you in Colorado?
Castle Rock. So I was right in the Front Range, and when it came to like gravel biking, for example, was phenomenal. You just head east towards Kansas, and you can go as long as you want. And it was that biking in the Front Range is incredible. Gravel biking in the Front Range is incredible. Mountain biking, of course, is great too, but that gravel biking there, that was hard to leave. That was just, you feel like a bird flying on the prairie when you're riding out there. It was awesome. And there's very few places that are that awesome. I have a ranch about an hour from here now that is our play place. And it reminds me a lot of Castle Rock because I just head west out of my door and I ride. Same thing, I ride to Colorado. I could actually ride to Castle Rock and I wouldn't hardly touch any pavement. So yeah, that's the piece I miss the most.
Wow. So not everybody knows what gravel biking is.
Sure.
Yeah, so fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, road biking used to be a huge thing, right? And then I think with the invention of cell phones, it's just caused the distracted drivers. A lot of people realize road biking is extremely dangerous as a result of so many distracted drivers out there. And I too used to be a road biker. I mean, I've always been a mountain biker more than anything, but I like the road to get endurance training. And gravel biking really sprung onto the scene in the early 2000s and has since exploded over the years. But in early 2000s, it was starting out as kind of a Midwest thing. And basically it's a glorified road bike or cross bike that's been turned into a little bit fatter tires and road bike gearing. And you go out and you ride gravel roads. And and it sounded so simple in the beginning, and I had buddies that were making fun of me because I was riding my mountain bike back in this race. I read it in Adventure Sports or I think it was National Geographic Adventure. It was called the Flint Hills Death Ride that I did in like 2001 or two, and it was a 90-mile ride in Kansas in July, and
Mm,
on dirt. And I flew my mountain bike. I had a Specialized Epic at the time back, and I did that first race with 50 other guys. And then I subsequently did it a few other times. And then Dirty Kansas, which became Unbound Gravel, started shortly after. And it just kept growing. And people started investing in, brands started designing, gravel bikes, which I'm like,
yeah.
that's stupid. There's no such thing. But it was basically a slightly reinforced road bike with fatter tires and more tire clearance. And then it's gotten bigger and bigger. Now you see guys on like basically road bikes with fat tires sometimes. And it's just kind of gone crazy over the years. But yeah, it's the new glorified mountain biking, I would say. And in my opinion, it's one of the greatest sports out there because it allows you to experience your surroundings. A lot of times when you're gravel biking, you can just look around. Where mountain biking, you're often focusing on the details
Yeah,
to
you don't
not
see so
crash.
much.
Or road biking, you're averting cars. But with gravel biking, it's one of those things I love to just go out and ride, 100 miles and just enjoy it, look around.
Yeah, you can cruise and enjoy it. We have a, gravel bike shop that opened up here in Gunnison, Colorado.
Yeah.
Oh, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the rumor was that we had 3,000 miles of twin track BLM and forest roads to ride.
Yeah.
And I just looked it up to try to confirm that because I've been riding it on my motorcycle.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, if you count every little pig trail dead end lane,
Yeah.
maybe, but I think it's closer to 1,200 miles of twin track and then another 800 of single track, which
Yeah.
might be a bit much for the gravel bike, depending, right?
Sure.
But man, it is a mecca for that kind of thing. And what's beautiful about it, and I enjoy this on the motorcycle too, is you just get away from everybody and everything.
Yeah, for
And you
sure.
see things you never anticipated. You
Yep.
know, if you don't get off the beaten path, then you'll never see what's off the beaten path. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but there's value in that.
Yep. I 100% agree.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I
Well,
love it.
that's cool. I like the idea, especially in a place like where you are. Gravel biking, I mean, it'll just take you places.
Yeah, and it's it's neat because you can just go out and count on a gas station for fuel, right? You go 40, 30, 40, 50 miles, hit a gas station, get a bottle of Coke and a slice of pizza and pickle in a bag and take off riding, go ride another 50 miles. And I have all kinds of loops from my cabin that are, I can do 30. I have either kind of these 30 to 50-mile loops that I can just go out and kind of do a figure eight and then hit this town of Goldway and get some whatever supplies. And then I just take out and just depending on how stupid of a day I want to do, just keep on jamming. And like I said, it's just different. And it I think for those that are cyclists, you'll appreciate that a lot of times, I mean, I love mountain biking. It's harder to get a consistent output workout. But road
Mm,
biking or gravel biking, if you want to target a zone, like if you're actually training,
yeah,
you can
you can.
target a zone and you can probably find something to stay steady in that. If you want to put out 180 watts for 45 minutes, you can probably find a climb where you can put out 180 watts or even a sustained piece of road. So there's a lot of great training if you're more a technical athlete that's trying to do more performance-based stuff and even wanting to cross over for triathlon training, but you want to stay safe, go out and get a gravel bike and go bang out miles.
That's a good idea. I love mountain biking a lot
Hmm.
and helped. I used to coach the local team here. I was just an assistant coach, but every day is an interval day
Yeah.
because you're going
Right.
up, 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 and then you're going down, and then you go up, up,
Yep.
up, 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 and then you're going down. And it's just, I like that kind of a workout, but like you're saying, you're not going to get that long, consistent experience, which road biking used to provide for me, but I've not road
Sure.
biked in years.
Yeah, I sold mine when I lived in Colorado. I just decided I had dodged death too many times.
Didn't want to die.
I didn't, yeah, I realized that with the amount of tens of thousands of miles I've spent on a road bike on paved roads, I just can't believe when I look back at like the amount of miles I put in when I lived in California on pavement was crazy. You got cars going by every 12 seconds. I mean, like the
Yeah.
probability of getting hit was so high. And And I never did in California. I got hit in the back of the head once by a landscape truck that had a broom hanging out of the back of it on a
Oh
Sunday
no.
morning at sunrise in Phoenix. And I had a car pull out right in front of me once, and I was Tukey and slammed into him, and the guy was mad at me, and I'm like, man, you just pulled out of nowhere. And I mean, it's dodgy. So, and these gravel bikes are a little more tough too. And my fancy carbon fiber 15-pound road bikes over the years, I'm always amazed they didn't break on some of the roads I was on anyway. So I
Yeah.
I feel better on my gravel bikes, even though they're probably not that different anymore. But mine's steel, so it's pretty tough.
Yeah, they're not as light that way, but they're fun.
Oh yeah,
Adventure racing. Tell us about your adventure racing. So this is something you love to do, but I don't
yeah,
know your resume.
yeah. Yeah, I've done over 500 endurance races over the years. I quit
Wow.
counting at 500, but with adventure racing, I've done over 100 of them. And I've raced anywhere from the sprints, which are like a 6 to 12 hour race, to 24 hours and multi-day, 2, 3, 4, 5 day races, or bigger races. But yeah, adventure racing is just a sport of mountain biking, trail running, kayaking, all via map and compass. And then there's often some other tasks or challenges that are in there. It could be something goofy. It could be, rollerblading. It could be, paddle on a rubber ducky. I mean, you just don't know. Every race director is going to do something crazy. The bigger the races get, often you have Tyrolean traverses or free rope ascending, and often rappelling, and just to kind of mix up the interest. But
Yeah.
you almost always racing as a team. But yeah, I just did one 3 or 4 weeks ago with my son. We did a 12-hour, 14-year-old son. We did a 12-hour adventure race together in his first. And it was just an epic outdoor day, all day running, biking, kayaking via map and compass. And he realized his dad's still pretty tough, even though he's a trillion times. He can run literally almost twice as fast as me. I just ran a 5:14 mile in the district championships in the
Wow, that's great.
track last night. But and then yeah, this weekend I just did a 24-hour adventure race with some friends that it was started at 8 p.m. Friday night. We raced until 8 p.m. Saturday. But yeah, it's a phenomenal sport. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's if you want to experience adventure, I tell people all the time that if you're a trail runner, if you're a gravel biker, a mountain biker, a paddler, but I think a lot of people go so heavy into a lot of these sports, and they go real singular into it. And at some point, you're going to get burnt out. And a great way to avoid that burnout is to do a sport that challenges you in the same parallel. And so adventure racing is great because you have to be good at all three disciplines, run, bike,
Mm.
kayak. And most people aren't good at all three. So it's a great way to isolate your weaknesses and work on doing that something better and give you a new challenge. But yet you may find a way to relove some of these sports that you maybe got burned out of. Maybe you got burned out on trail running or ultra running, and this will kind of get it all going again. So it's a great way to experience nature and see things that you wouldn't see otherwise.
So help us out a little bit. Adventure racing has been around for quite a while now, but I don't
Mhm.
know how big it is. How many
Yeah,
people are doing adventure racing? I mean, you hear people talk about triathlons a
sure.
lot,
Hmm.
marathons a ton, right?
Yeah,
Ultras, they're just booming everywhere too.
yeah.
Adventure racing I hear about, but I don't hear it quite as often.
Yeah, it was really big when Eco Challenge came out back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And that made it grow all over the country. And it's still never as big as all those other sports you just mentioned. But it was a big scene at the time, and hence how I've raced so many of them. There used to be a bazillion races all the time. But uh, the sport has definitely retracted a lot over the years, but I feel like it's on a resurgence, and I think some of the reason why is kind of like I just said. I think a lot of people gravel biking went from being this really niche sport, and then now all of a sudden these events have just become huge. I mean,
Yeah.
Unbound is 4,000 people. Steamboat out by you is 2,500 people or maybe more. Mid South, I think 2 or 3,000 people, and they're just a touch of the quantities. Barry Roubaix, and there are so many people doing them. But we all, after a while, once you've done these local races or these destination events, then you want something else. And so those people start to leave the sport and they train by themselves, or again, they look for something different. And no different than trail and ultra running. Once you've ran 100 miles a lot of people, a lot of my friends, after they've ran 100 numerous times, they get burnt out and they're like, all right, I don't want to run that far anymore. I want to, maybe
Yeah.
50 miles is good, or maybe 50 Ks are good. But maybe doing another sport like a venture race will allow me to have a challenge that is still scary, but it's different. It's something I haven't done. So sometimes it's bucket list, sometimes it leads to kind of another growth. So yeah, I think that's where now adventure racing is getting a decent growth again. One of our the first time years, the one I did with my son was right here at Georgetown Lake, and they had, I believe it was 130 teams that showed up to race, which is a phenomenal turnout. I don't think I've hardly ever, of all the races I've been in, there's normally not that many. There was a few back in the day, but they're usually 30 to 50 teams usually in a race. And here he had a sellout crowd of 130, 136 teams. So
Wow.
so yeah, it's doing good. I think it has some legs to it.
One thing I like about what you just said is just the word team.
Hmm. Yeah, for
It
sure.
doesn't have to be a solo event. And something that I've enjoyed about interviewing people that have done adventure races is the strategy that becomes a team strategy.
Yeah,
It's like, well, let's put more weight on the fastest person
yeah,
because the
sure.
slowest person determines how fast we're going to finish,
Exactly.
or maybe use a bungee cord to help
Yep,
somebody get up something who's dragging a little bit, and whoever's kind of bonked at the time gets help from everybody else. And
exactly.
I love that aspect to it. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, it makes you realize what one thing that I found. I'll give you an example. So I was doing this race called Primal Quest in Moab back in it was 2006. It was a long time ago, but two of my teammates were just dragging on the mountain bike. And at that time, I was racing mountain bikes a lot, and I was really, really strong on the bike. So I hooked on to my one teammate, and then he hooked on to his wife, and I drugged them too for I think it was
Wow.
40 or 50 miles. And I just felt awesome. And meanwhile we had already ran 60 miles. We'd already well, no, sorry, yeah, we just ran about 60 miles, and then we were on this bike leg at that point and getting ready to do an 8 mile swim and a 58-mile kayak and a 38-mile run after that. And but I felt like a champ. And we're 24 30 hours or something in. This is all off-grid desert in Moab in July. And so it was slow. But anyway, I felt like just a robot. And I just hammered and it was awesome. And I was like, I am so awesome. This is so cool. And then I bonked pulling into this little area by this creek before we had about 6 or 7 miles left to get to the whitewater swim. And I bonked big time. I mean, the lights went out. And if anybody's ever bonked before, it's one of the worst things you can ever have happen to you as an endurance athlete. And it was unbelievable. I couldn't hardly think. I had to like think to breathe. And we stopped
Wow.
at this gas station and I bought these apple fruit pies. If you remember them, they're like 12 trillion calories in a fruit pie. They sell them like cherry
Right.
fruit pies and all. And I ate like 3 or 4 of them, and I thought I'd come back pretty quick, but it didn't happen. And we wanted to get, because there was a dark zone. If we didn't make this 8 mile swim start by a certain time, then we couldn't swim. We'd have to sleep and wait till the next morning. And we wanted to get that done so we can get off on the kayak. Well, so we take off from there, and then the teammates that I just pulled forever, one of them had to hook onto me and tow me. And I remember I couldn't hardly go downhill. I was so weak. I swear I was slowing down. I don't even know how it worked. It felt like my body was dragging on the ground. It's just one of the worst things ever. But again, then they helped me through that. And then once we got to the swim, it was whitewater. We were in body armor and freaking swimming in the Green River, and all I had to do was float, and I
Right.
recovered through that period. And but yeah, it's a neat sport. And I mean, later in that race, uh, those same two teammates were dying, their feet were rotting off and everything, and my teammate Jack was carrying both of their 25, 30 pound backpacks, and I same thing, tied a leash to both of them, and I'm sitting there dragging them through the desert. And it's just crazy the stuff you go through, but it's amazing. A lot of it sounds more awesome than it is, but a lot of it is just a subtle tug. It's more of psychological more than anything.
Yeah,
When you
yeah.
hook onto somebody and pull, you're not actually putting out. I put out an extra 5 or 10 watts, but it's not as significant
But it
as you
helps
would
them a
imagine.
ton.
It's a mental benefit, and it makes them draft closer, and Like you feel like I always hate it when somebody had to hook onto me and pull me, but because you feel really humble at that point. But and at the same time, you develop a level of respect for your teammates that makes you really appreciate that you're working as a team to get to wherever it is. And everybody has their strengths. You know, some people are better cyclists, some are better runners, and some are better paddlers. And it's rare that everybody is just awesome at everything. Like it never actually
Yeah.
works out that way.
Okay, give us an example of a beginner adventure race, and
Yeah,
then I want to hear about a big one, so we
sure.
can make a contrast there. I mean, if people are hearing you talk about, well, yeah, 100 miles of this and 60 miles of that and
Yeah.
8 miles of this, and they're
Yep.
going, what?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of great entry points into the what they call the sprint adventure races. And that could be 3 to 6 hours typically. And in a sprint adventure race, the points are all marked on a map, and they usually dumb it down to where you just have to kind of use your gut to get there. Meaning in a bigger level race, a lot of times you have to plot coordinates, and then which takes a little bit of knowledge anyway. And then you have to be able to set a bearing with a compass and run a bearing for a given distance to find it hidden in the woods somewhere. And that takes a special set of skills that a lot of people don't have. So in the sprint side, they want to get people into the sport. And so that's where they make it as simple as possible, but yet still gives you a challenge. Because a lot of people, frankly, can't read a map to go to the grocery store very well.
Yeah,
Because we all
sure.
use Google Maps anymore, right? But yeah, so I did one with my son probably 6 or 7 years ago. So technically he's done two adventure races, but he was little at the time. He was I don't know 8 somewhere in there, and it was a 3 or 4 hour race, and we went out and we biked probably 10 miles. We ran probably 6, 8, and then we had to swim some stuff in inner tubes and the whole thing was just fun. We didn't even use a compass. It was like we follow these roads until we're going to go to this intersection. Okay, then after we get to this intersection, then it looks like on this map we're going to go down and there's going to be a creek and we got to go to that creek and it looks like to the left of the road we're going to find a box and we're going to go stamp it with a punch on it to our passport. And so they make it kind of more simple like that. So it's great for somebody to go get their feet wet and then get comfortable with it. And then once you do that, the next thing to do is to look at an orienteering event and go out to a beginner orienteering event where they'll teach you how to navigate. And that's where you learn those next steps before you go jumping into, say, even a 12-hour adventure race or a 24-hour adventure race where you need to be strong with a map and compass. You need to be very comfortable with which way is north and how do I position a map in relation to a compass to be able to determine a bearing. That's the root of adventure racing. So you either need that or you need to find somebody that's a good navigator. And that to me is when I started in the sport. I started with Muddy Buddy is the first thing I did. If you ever remember those, it was a run and bike 2-man team. And I did it and I'm like, this is awesome. I want to do something that's bigger. And then I found this balance bar sprint. It was a 6-hour race. And I go in there, we did this and same thing. It was kind of dumbed down adventure racing. And I was like, I'm just smart enough to kind of get through this. But then I wanted to do a 24-hour race and I didn't know anybody and I couldn't find anybody. So I just
Mm.
read books on how to navigate. And once I started getting my comfort level with that, I started tackling bigger and bigger races and eventually was able to build a pretty big team. We had about 12 of us that we would cycle in depending on where we were racing at in the country and what the distance was and who was available. And as long as I was there, we'd be fine because I could navigate. And I had a couple other teammates also over the years, of course, that could navigate. So but that's really the trick. If you don't have a navigator, it's brutal. So stick with sprints until you get that piece figured out.
Well, orienteering it's really unique in that you learn the basics, like you said. You can choose a direction that you need to go,
Hmm.
but knowing exactly how far you've gone,
Yeah,
I think is trippy. And
it
you're going to
is.
have to, at some point, you're going to have to get bearings again to figure out where you are, perhaps. But did you ever get good at just saying, we have gone this far. We got to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but distance isn't it's not always linear in terms of, that measurement of meters or however you want to look at it. But a lot of times it just can be as simple as time. You look at it and
Yeah.
you say, okay, well, I did this past weekend. I'm like, all right, this section here should be about 4 miles. And at our current rate of speed, that's going to take about 30 minutes a mile based upon the terrain, or maybe we're paddling or whatever it was. say, all right, based upon this, it's 4 miles, it's 30 minutes a mile, it's going to take 2 hours to get there. And sometimes you can look at it and say, all right, well, this is 100 meters. So I know I should be able to see this thing in the trees. Or this is about, 1,500 meters, mile, 1,500 meters, close enough. I know that this mountain bike pace on this trail, because the trail sucks, is going to probably take us 10 or 12 minutes. So I tell my teammate, hey, do a watch check. And we just monitor the time. And the time is an easy one. Now you can pace count, and I have hardly ever done it. You're good orienteering people. Some of the best navigators I've ever known, they're really good at pace counting, or they have a buddy with them. And that's where you can push that off on a teammate. You're like, look, I'm going to be looking at the maps, but I need your average pace is going to be, 2 feet. And we know we're going 200 feet. So you need to count 100 paces, whatever that may be. So there's things like that you can do where you task it to a teammate. And I've always been fascinated with the teams that do that, but it's not like we're carrying little pebbles of sand and counting them. We've got 100 and we're going to drop them off as we go. I've never done any of that, but yeah, for me, it's always been time. On the bike, you can still run an old school, you have the wheel mounted magnets and like a $30 bike computer. You can still do that. And that's still legal for the mountain biking side. You can't use any GPS at all. But on the trail running side, yeah, you better pick a tree and like, all right, that's approximately 200 meters probably to that tree. And then beyond that tree is another probably 300 meters to that one. And you just kind of pick it off in pieces. And you get more accurate than you'd think. And then, of course, you just need to read topography. Sometimes, like say I'm looking at that picture of the mountains behind you. If you knew that it's approximately 1.5 miles to that mountain, well, if you're just going to that mountain, the base of the mountain, you just got to get to the base of the mountain. Like I remember we were racing in, Northern California somewhere, up in Yosemite, and or sorry, not Yosemite, whatever it was. I'm drawing a blank, but we were racing in Northern California, and I was lost, admittedly, but on the map I could clearly see this giant saddle in the mountains, and I'm like, oh, that's where we need to go. And so I just set a bearing to that. And then from where I thought we were, but ultimately I knew if we just go to that, I could figure out where we were. And I knew there was a creek between us and it. And I knew we were somewhere in this large angle to this big saddle. And sure enough, once we got to the base, we hit the creek. We saw this big hard bend in the creek. And then I knew, oh, hey, this is this bend on the map. Perfect. Well, this is the bend and that's the saddle. Therefore, now I know exactly where we are on the map. And now I can figure out where we need to go from here. So there's so many different ways once you start doing it that you can use to race more intelligently. But a lot of it has to be learned the hard way. And you need to be really afraid, especially nighttime racing is a good way to learn how well you know how to read a map and compass. And trust me, I make mistakes all the time. Everybody does. It's just, and then you get race directors like my buddy Paul this weekend. No offense, Paul, but he had one of the checkpoints in the wrong trawl, and that happens. Every race director it almost always has one. It just is part of the excitement. You just have to, it's just you just roll with it. But
it's all part of the fun.
It was in the wrong draw, and that happens too. So sometimes you're like, man, I know we're here, and you might be right, but you also might be wrong because you didn't read the map right. And there's a lot of pieces to reading maps that is part science or math, and then part like licking your finger, stick it in the air, and try to figure out which way the wind's blowing.
Well, the crazy thing about it, Josh, is that you may have been going for 72 hours.
Right.
And it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And you're probably daydreaming or hallucinating anyway.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be able to think clearly enough to sort out where you are on a map and figure out what you need to do next.
Yep. Yeah.
Tell us a story about that. I know that's happened to you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I will say in adventure racing, so I have a good one. So we were racing in Santa Barbara. This was like the Calico Championships or something like that back in the day, Calico Finals. We had been racing, I think we started at 3 a.m. and we did a big run and we did a giant paddle, ended up going from, I think it was Point Magoo to UC Santa Barbara. I may be mixing up the Point Magoo Beach, but we ended at UC Santa Barbara. And then, and we were it was dark. So it was probably 15 hours-ish in. And then we began this huge ascent up the mountains. And I if you're for you in Colorado, I'm sure you're like, oh yeah, the mountains of Santa Monica. But the little micro mountains there in Santa Monica are no joke. Those trails go
Yeah.
up for freaking ever. And
And
you wouldn't
steep.
think it. And they're steep. Yeah. And so we take off mountain biking up this thing. And in this race, they did something that no other race has ever done. Is they gave us street maps with points marked on them. This was no UTM coordinates, no grids, no topo lines, street maps,
Whoa.
which was just such a weird twist. And all of us are like, wow, this is kind of crazy. But it was a beautiful new challenge that all of us that were doing that race were pretty good racers. And so meanwhile, we hit about 3 a.m. and we're descending down this single track. And we've been climbing all night and finally began our descent. And we had to cross this giant valley. And I was like, man, I don't really want to go across this. And I knew in my tiredness, I just probably missed something. And this team, there was this other navigator and this other team from Mexico, they're from Monterrey. We were chatting and I was like, man, I'm pretty sure we missed this turn. He's like, no, man, we didn't miss the turn. I'm like, yeah, I think we missed a turn. We've been going down way too far. But again, we don't have topo lines, so we didn't know what elevation we should be at. We just knew like, well, we started here, we're going here. I feel like we've probably gone over half this distance, and that was in the middle. And so, but we didn't want to descend all the way to the beach because we were at like 2,800 feet at the summit, and we didn't want to go to zero because we had to go across and then go back deep in the mountains again. So anyway, it was like 3 a.m. And I told my teammates, I'm like, we need to stop and we should just sleep because if we go to Santa Barbara, then we're really screwed. And then we have to find water somewhere in the middle of the night. And then we have to bike all the way up the freaking mountains to get back. When I know we just need to get over here. And if I can just wait until sunrise, I can see across this draw once this fog clears and I can see. And so within like 12 seconds, we were asleep on the trail. The Mexican team, like, no, we're going south. It was cold and we busted out. The only time I've ever had to use my emergency blanket, thank God. But we all wrapped up ourselves in our emergency blankets and just went to sleep for a little bit. Well, next thing you know, I remembered hearing somebody at one point, but I didn't think much of it because we were exhausted. And then right before sunrise, I woke up and I could see there was just a hint of light coming in. I could see across the canyon. I could see the single track. I knew it was above us. And so I wake up my teammates and then I see this other team sitting there. And I go over there and as I walk up to him, I wish I remember this guy's name, but he's like, Josh, he's like, holy cow, man. He's like, we were gonna stone you. And I'm like, what do you mean you're gonna stone me? And he's like, yeah, we walked up, we saw all these. He's like, we went to Santa Barbara. Turns out you were right. You shouldn't have done that. He's like, we went and got water at the fire station. And then we came back up the mountain and we were just too tired climbing. And we decided to stop here. It just happened to be you guys were here. And when we walked up, we saw these shiny pods. We thought you were aliens. And we all walked up with stones. We were going to smash you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what did you guys get in Santa Barbara? But anyway, it was one of the funniest things ever because they, obviously these guys they were just so passionate about like, yeah, we were gonna freaking stone you, man. And we ended up racing with them for the next like 20 hours or whatever it was. That race took 38 hours to finish, and we raced the whole rest of it with them. So it wasn't necessarily a sleep deprived story, but it was a sleep deprived story that caused, like, hey, we need to stop and do something different. It made the other team probably a little sleep deprived that almost stoned us, which is first time I've ever been mistaken for an alien to my knowledge. So yeah, so that was a good one.
Well, hallucinations also happen on some of these events.
Yeah.
You're going without sleep, you're pushing your body to the limit.
Yep.
And so I could see how it'd be real easy for people to convince themselves of some whacked out stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So tell us about a hallucination story.
Yeah, so that one I was biking across South Dakota. I did this. It was called the Trans South Dakota. It was a 720-mile bike race and gravel bike race, and it was on the fourth day. The coolest hallucination I could ever have. And it was on the fourth day. I was riding along, and I just couldn't wait to get to the finish. It was beautiful. Sunset was looking just gorgeous, and it was soft in the sky that day, and everything was lining up. Next thing you know, my old dog Lady, my golden retriever, had been dead for like, I don't know, 3-4 years at least, probably 5. She was running in front of me, just off to the right. And I couldn't look at her. When I looked at her, she'd disappear. But if I just looked straight ahead, she was just about 10 to 15 degrees off angle. And if I looked straight ahead, I could see her clearly. And she kept running. She'd look back at me like she always would when we'd go for runs. and I see her tongue hanging out. She was just like running. And I rode with her
Wow.
for like, I don't know. I mean, it was hours. It was a couple hours at least that I rode with her, and I just couldn't believe I was crying out there. Like, this is the greatest day ever. And I mean, it was so emotional, and I just couldn't believe it was happening. I still brings tears to my eyes thinking about it because it was one of the coolest things that's ever happened that I know didn't actually happen. Or I mean, maybe it did. I don't know, but but I believe there, like in that race, I was riding about probably 20 hours a day, 21 hours a day, and obviously my brain was cooked in the heat,
Right. Yeah.
and brain was cooked from not sleeping very much, and for pedaling that many miles, but that was seriously one of the greatest hallucinations I've ever had, and it's still so vibrantly there. I mean, it was to me, it was as close to real as you can get. I would have if I'd probably be dying someday thinking that actually happened, like in the real world. But
Well, and
uh,
some people would say it did happen,
yeah, and I would
you
argue
know?
in many ways, yeah, there's a lot of weird things that happen in life that you start to wonder the things that are more complex than we can understand. And yeah, for sure, that was the greatest ever for sure.
Ah, so we've talked about incredible distances. We've talked about extreme exhaustion. We've talked about even hallucinations. Why do you do it? What's the
Yeah.
point?
I always told everybody I just got a lot of people to prove wrong, I guess. I think that's it. But to me, I love getting outside. I grew up a country kid, and all I ever did was hunt and fish and just build tree houses and explore and do whatever in the woods. And I think as an adult, we get sometimes just captive to just living and just working, right? I mean,
Right.
what's the purpose? It might, to me, the purpose is to explore and push the limits. And I find it really intriguing to see what the human body can do if you just put the right nutrients into it. The older I get, the more I realize our bodies are basically just a car. And the calories we put into it are no different than fuel, and the electrolytes we put into us are no different than I guess, the battery, the electricity that keeps it going. So it doesn't take much. I just did this 24-hour race. I haven't been doing much besides push-ups every week. And and I raced just as strong as I have years ago. And I mean, if yeah, I wanted to just open it up and hammer that race harder, I definitely could have. And it's shocking to me that I'm no superhuman by any stretch, but it's just science. If you just put basic 200 calories in your body an hour, and you drink consistently, and you take electrolytes, you'll be fine. You can do almost anything. And it
Mm.
really is neat to see that. And again, through any sport that I've done, to at least complete. Yeah, if you're gonna be at the tip of the spear, yeah, you need a whole bunch of things and you need to train. I'm not saying you shouldn't train. I'm just saying I've done a lot of really stupid things without hardly any training at all at times. And it's just science that works and it'll allow you to finish well.
That's that's kind of fascinating. I did record an episode when I got back from Kilimanjaro in January, and I was talking about how I bonked on the mountain and hallucinated.
Yeah.
But that was because I fell asleep while I was hiking.
Oh,
And
yeah, sure.
I was still hiking. I was still
Yeah,
moving, but I
sure.
was in a different place. I was definitely asleep. At the funniest thing is at one point I thought, well, if I could just say a word out loud, maybe I would be awake.
Right.
And I couldn't.
No way.
I could not
That's
say a
awesome.
single word. And I dreamed I wasn't moving, but I was still walking.
Yeah.
It's just, but what got me there, and this is to your point, Josh, what got me there is we were taking super, super short breaks.
Hmm.
And I decided to shoot some film or some video rather than, eating and drinking at about
Sure.
17,000, 17,500, something like that. And all of a sudden the group was going again. And I thought, well, we'll stop again in an hour or so. I'll be fine. I
Yeah.
was not fine,
Yeah.
because I hadn't been fueled. And then I realized when I got to the top, I had one energy bar that had 2 bites out of it in 7 hours.
Yeah. And
I
that
was like,
doesn't work.
okay, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work when you're
That
hitting it at
does
sunrise,
not
does it?
work.
He's probably
So
starting at
what you're
midnight.
saying about the science of it,
Yep.
200 calories an hour, electrolytes, stay hydrated, you can
Yep.
go.
Sure. That's all it takes. And
Mm,
especially, I've done Kili too, and man, they're giving you so much good food. You got to freaking throw it all down, man. Those freaking guides on Kili. They like the amount of fresh mangoes I ate on that hike, and yeah, the banana beer afterwards was terrible, but the fresh fruit and root made it easy to go.
Well, it was an amazing experience, but back to that formula, 200 calories an hour, electrolytes and water.
Yeah.
If someone is not fit,
Hmm.
right? And they're like, I want to try something like this, but I don't know where to begin.
Hmm.
How do you recommend? I mean, could you just say, well, follow that formula, see what happens?
Yeah. I think most people, if you follow that formula, will be fine, as at least a starting point. I take 270 calories an hour, but I have an optimized formula that I've learned over the years that works for me. But if you do somewhere between 160 and 200 calories an hour, depending on your body weight, you will be able to be fine. But the problem that most people do, and I've done it, I've learned very well by throwing up in races, is that people come into the aid station, they're like, ooh, gummy bears, Reese's Pieces, and Snickers, and paydays, and all this other stuff. And they throw
Yeah.
down 2,000 calories, and then they're still drinking their whatever hydration mix it is that they like. That's why people throw up in races. But they always blame it on the hydration companies. And now, granted, some hydration mixes don't work for people, and that takes a while to figure out too. And I've had those battles where it takes a while. In some things, I even worked well with a given hydration brand for a while until it didn't work and I had to switch. But to me, I don't eat hardly any of that junk on course. It's not to knock on the race directors putting it out there. We all want it, and sometimes it's needed. But that being said, in running races, I've learned I don't hardly eat anything on course. I drink my hydration mix. I run my own plan. I'll eat some pickles, bacon, blueberries. Those are all cool. But you're always going to crave one of two things: sweet or salts. Yeah, it's just that simple, right? Our bodies are basically everything's polarity, right? It's plus and minus, sweet or salt. Those are the two different things that we crave as humans. And so when we race in any discipline, I always bring sweets and salts because at some point I'm probably going to be sick of all the sweets that I'm drinking in my hydration mix. And a
Yeah.
salt will help to correct your tongue. It'll help to correct where your belly's going off. But at the same time, sometimes you're like, man, I'm freaking tired, and I could eat a whole bag of cherry sours, or I could drink a Coca-Cola right now, and that would be amazing. And it'll bring you back. But if you just keep things simple, 200 calories an hour, and then yeah, if you throw down a bunch of stuff at an aid station, drink water for the next hour because you don't need it. You just took in 700 calories. You may have some issues from that, but maybe not. But drink water for the next hour and then go back to your mix. But
Mm.
200 calories an hour, if you do that and then supplement with something simple and as osmolality neutral as possible, bag of peanuts or something, something salty, well, you'll be able to go forever.
Wow. I told everyone at the beginning that we would hear about this lake adventure that you had, and it was
Sure.
Falcon Lake, and this is on the border with Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah, it splits
Um,
right down the border.
well, you had one of those what I would say is a major scare,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
and you have a good story to tell about it. But
Yeah.
what happened down there?
Yeah, so my son and my buddy and I, my buddy Jay's at the time I think was 67, I think, and he's tough as freaking nails. But we fish a lot. We bow fish, so we take bow and arrow and shoot carp and gar and whatnot. And then my son and I and we went down to Falcon Lake, which is loaded with these big gator gar. And but it's also on the border of Mexico. And even when you pull into the park, they're like, "Why are you here?" "We're here to shoot gator gar," and or at least try to shoot one. And it's a lot harder than people understand. But they advise us. It's the only time I've ever been to a park where they said, "Are you armed?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're armed." They're like, "Good. You need to be here. This is the cartel runs this lake after dark. We do not suggest anybody be on this lake after dark. We are not going to be here after dark. But this is a known, route where they're running drugs across the border just all the time. The U.S. border literally divides the lake. It's the Colorado River is what it is, but it's dammed up. It's this giant lake. We were like, it'll be fine. We're armed. But we did not obviously want to engage with the cartel. We knew that would only end bad. We sure maybe we survive and kill a cartel guy, and then they come and kill our whole entire family. That was not the objective.
Yeah, that's
We
not the
only
goal.
had it as worst case scenario, right? And plus, we went in here I've got my buddy Jay and my son with me. I mean, it's the last thing we want to do. We're just there to have some fun. And we talked to locals ahead of time. They're like, if you just don't do something stupid, you'll be fine. Well, we didn't necessarily do something stupid, but it kind of happened that it ended up being a bad circumstance. So we were, I think, 12 nautical miles, if I remember right, in from the boat ramp, and in this big cove that was giant, and we had gator gar everywhere, and we were in there. This was in August, I believe. It was crazy hot, and about 4 in the afternoon, I was like, hey, let's go over there on that beach and look for arrowheads. The lake at the time was at 18% capacity, which was still giant, but it was down. And I said, that sandy beach right there, that the Indians probably used to be here, and I bet there's arrowheads on that beach because no one's probably seen that beach in a long time. And we were just getting cooked out there looking for fish. So we go over and we park the boat on the beach, and I remember telling my buddy Jay, I'm like, we gotta tie it up. He's like, nah, there's no wind. I'm like, yeah, you're right. 45 minutes later, I was finding some arrowheads, and they were over there by me, and we found some cool ones, which turns out is illegal in a state park, which I didn't realize at the time. Park ranger later lectured me about that, but so don't do that in a state park. But
You can look, but you can't
yeah, you
take.
can look, but you can't touch
Yeah.
and take them, I guess. But yeah, so we found some really cool arrowheads, and next thing you know, about probably 45 minutes it went by, and I look over at the boat, and there was just a slight breeze. I'm talking slight because it was just clear, 100 degrees or whatever out. But all of a sudden, the clouds were coming in, a little storm was coming, and the breeze started picking up. And I look over and I see the boat, and it's drifted out 100, 200 yards. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. Meanwhile, this cove, we had been seeing 5 to 8 foot long alligator gar, up to 2+ 100 pound fish out there just rolling. If you don't know what an alligator gar is, it's basically a gar crossed with an alligator. I mean, that's what it looks like. It looks like a giant fish with giant teeth. They bite a hold of you. It's really bad. And though they say that they won't attack humans, I didn't want to be the first guy to find out. But we're also back in the middle of freaking nowhere. And because this lake is pretty remote and known to be dangerous, you don't see very many people down there. Pretty much just fishermen. There's no leisure, hardly any leisure people out there. We never saw leisure people out there. I'm sure there's time to time. But anyway, so I knew we were in a pickle, because if we just sat there and waited, we'd be waiting a long time. And the hike out was brutal. It just would have been horrible. And we didn't have anything. Everything was in the boat. Our guns, our phones, our everything, food, water, everything we had was in there. So, and again, the wind was barely blowing, so I didn't think much of it. So I stripped down to my boxers, and I was like, I'll be back. And my son wanted to swim with me, and which at the time I think he was 11. And I was like, I even considered it. That's how simple of a swim I thought this was. I thought this is like 200 meters max. I'm 2-time Ironman. I spent a lot of time in the pool. I hadn't swam in 7 years, but I have swum a lot. But I thought, this won't take long. But I thought, buddy, you better stay here. There could be some trees underneath the water, dang fish, you don't know. So anyway, I take off swimming after it again, not looking like a hero. It just should have been a 2 to 4 minute thing. Well, as I enter the water, the winds pick up, and I'm sitting there swimming, and like, what in the world is happening? And ended up being the storm blew in big time. And meanwhile, I've got 2 big decks on my 19-foot aluminum boat, and those decks acted like wind sails. And I remember seeing my boat tilt forward and just drafting away from me with the wind. And I'm sitting there looking up at it, and I'm alligator sighting, as they call it in swimming. Or I look up, I'm like, all right, and I just put my head down and just sit there grunting it out as hard as I could, trying to get to the boat. 3 hours later, maybe 4, is probably somewhere over 3 hours later, because it was about a half hour before dark, and I knew I entered the water roughly around 4:45. It was August, so I was somewhere in that 3-4 hour range of swimming. I had to give up at some point from catching the boat. I couldn't. It was just moving too fast, and it was also drifting too deep across this lake where I wasn't going to be able to get to it. And so I had to alter paths. I couldn't go backwards because the waves were all white capping and crashing over me. And so I just had to swim to a shorter destination on the beach. And, so it was probably a few mile swim or something. Once I finally got to the beach, which was a freaking miracle in itself, or I should back up. At one point, I had waves crash over me so many times in a row, I couldn't get my breath. And it's the one time in my life that I've had to use a back float. And I never really appreciated the value of that. and I will tell you, it's one of the greatest things that you can know how to do because I just flipped over my back and I just looked up and let the rain and waves crash down on me. But it was okay. I just floated and I just relaxed and I kind of calmed down a little bit, got my breath back, and then I went back to swimming again. I think when I did that, my buddy Jay and Jax both thought that I drowned because they said they saw me like go down is what they said,
Wow.
which it was probably just because it was so far across and they were able to get up on this kind of high point where we were finding arrowheads to watch me. But given how high the waves were, I think it just probably they probably lost sight of me, or it may have been the time that I flipped over. I ended up being fine, of course. I kept swimming, and I was scared, but I never felt like my life was in danger. I mean, it was just it was a survival moment, but it wasn't like, oh, I can't believe I survived that. It was scary because I knew I hadn't eaten anything for hours. We'd only had like a
Yeah.
couple drinks that day, and here I mean, who goes and swims for that long? It's not often you do, and especially when I haven't even swam in the gym for 7 years prior to. So I was more worried about cramping or having something bad happen like that, where I'd be back floating for frickin' ever out there. But I was lucky to make it to the beach, and then once I got to the beach, I knew I had about a half hour before it was dark, dark. The sun had just gone behind the clouds, and again, it was raging pretty good with the rain, and I when I got to the beach because the lake had come down so far, there were zebra mussels everywhere. And if you don't know what a zebra, or if anybody doesn't know what a zebra mussel is,
Ouch.
they're really sharp little shells. And here I'm barefoot in boxers, and I was like feeling like freaking Forrest Gump out there. So, or whatever, when he from Castaway, Tom Hanks in Castaway.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I get to the freaking beach, and I'm like, man, I need some shoes. And I found a piece of foam that was stuck in the sand. It was about a foot and a half or so wide, and I tore it in half, and I poked two holes through it, and I put my big toes through each one of them. And I felt like the coolest freaking man on the planet. I was like, man. Meanwhile, I'm thinking Jax and Jay are watching me from the other side, but I'm not even really looking back. It's all happening. I just figured like Jax officially thinks his dad's the coolest guy on the planet. Meanwhile, I don't realize that they think I died and they went to get help. So they're out there bushwhacking, no lights, no nothing, across the
Mm.
desert all night. Well, so anyway, I take off, running down the beach in my Forrest Gump sandals, and the wind was blowing so hard it ended up blowing one of them off about halfway into my. I probably had a mile or two run to get to the shoreline to my boat, and then I ended up finding a windbreaker that was in the sand, and I ended up yanking it out of the sand. It was full of all these little scorpions. I remember shaking
Oh
out all these
no.
things, thinking, "What in the hell are they all these scorpions in this thing for?" And it must have been some den or something, and I tied it around my other foot, and then I was good. And again, I went back to running all the way to the boat, and again, I'm feeling like a freaking hero, not realizing the probably the sheer level of fear that's in their brains right now. And so I get to the boat, and my boat was back in this cove, and it was up against the sand. My boat weighs 1,800 pounds. It's got 90 horsepower, motor on the back, and it's all steel. It's a saltwater edition boat, so everything's real heavy in that motor. And trying to get with the heavy winds blowing it into the beach by myself out into the water, it's like being in a movie where as I got in the front of the boat and I turned on my trolling motor and I just left it run. And then I got in the back and I'm pushing, pushing, pushing. And then I jumped in the boat and I'm in there like brr, 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 trying to get the gas motor to start. And next thing you know, the trolling motor turns and I hit the beach again. I'm like, oh, I jump out and I push the stupid thing off the beach again. Except this time I took some baling wire and I wired the trolling motor so it would go straight only. I think it took three, it was my third attempt. And I was finally able to get the gas motor on and pull the trolling motor up and get everything turned off. And that was one of the coolest moments ever because everything worked out, right? At this point, I'm thinking
Right.
I am only superhuman, and my son is literally going to have a story for the rest of his life about how awesome his dad is. Meanwhile, I get in the boat, I flip on all these lights, and I've got everything, phones, everything. Now we're back in action and full connected to the world in case whatever. And it's dark at this point. And so, I've got all the lights on. I get over there to the beach and I find my clothes folded up neatly on the beach, and that's it. And I was like, well, where the hell did they go? And then I started thinking, there's no way that they swam after me. Because Jay, I remember he just told me a few weeks earlier, he'd hurt a shoulder or something. I was like, you need to go in there and go swimming at the Y. You might meet some girls or something. Anyways, like I'm a terrible swimmer. I sink in all the time. So I knew he wasn't a good swimmer because I remember he just had told me that. and when I was teasing him. So I knew he wouldn't have swam. And I knew there's no way he would have let Jax go in after me, even if they thought, because then I realized, well, shoot, if they left, they obviously thought I died. And so I thought there's no way that he would have let Jackson go. And the only way that he would have gone in is if Jackson somehow sprung into the water and without control, right? But he was little. He's like 8 or 9 or something then. Or I guess maybe 11. I forget. I think this was 3 years ago now, if I remember right. But so he would have been 11. But long story short, I get there and this is, obviously I looked for tracks briefly on the beach, but due to the rain, there weren't any tracks left. And so I called 911 and they routed me to the park office. The park office was closed. Ended up getting I called 911 first, actually, which ran 911 Mexico, which I didn't know was a thing. And and when the lady answered the phone, she's like, no, you need to call 911 in America. I'm like, well, how do I do that? I called 911 and I am in America, but it somehow rang 911 in Mexico. I don't know how to solve this problem. That's what it was. She gave me the phone number to the parks office. And so I ended up calling the parks office and they were like, gosh, you guys are where? And we're like, yeah, we're back in Tiger Cove. And she's like, all right. She's like, there's no one at the lake right now. She's like, I'll call the ranger. And so that led to whole search and rescue being kicked off. And
wow.
we ended up having, the Rangers coming out and they called me obviously. And the very first thing he did was lecture me about picking up arrowheads on the beach. I told him what we were doing and how it went down.
He said, I'm
He's
trying
like,
to save my friend's life, my son's
yeah,
life. Let's
yeah,
move
I couldn't
on.
believe it. And I was like, yeah, we were looking at arrowheads on the beach. That's illegal, right? I'm like, I get it. I mean, and I'm like, I took all the arrowheads, I threw them out. I'm like Mother Nature. I gave them back. So, but yeah, he's like, we'll be out there, but it's going to be, probably an hour and a half before we can get to you. So over that time, I had a pistol with me, and I ran down as far as I took the boat all around as far as I could, but then or at least we're in the area that I knew that they would most likely go. After that, I went on foot and I ran down the beach in each direction as far as I could go that I felt that they would have gone. And I looked for tracks and I could never find tracks. And I kept firing my gun in the air, hoping they would hear it. But I knew with the winds blowing at like 30 or 40 mile an hour, and they were out of the south, I knew they were only going to be to the south of me. I knew there was a low probability that they would even hear it. So,
right.
But I tried. And anyway, I get back to the boat about the time the Rangers got there and they ran in on thermals. And so they came in, total blackout, which was pretty impressive given how dangerous that lake is with trees. I was scared to death driving it, even with my freaking, fancy GPS. But they came in and explained the whole situation, and they looked for tracks just like I did and didn't find anything. And they're like, well, we've called human tracking dogs, but they're out of Laredo. They won't be here till about 3 or 4 in the morning. You should go back, park the boat, and just go get some rest. And I was like, you're crazy. Like, there's no way I'm gonna go back, get some freaking rest. And I didn't want to sound like a weird, like Liam Neeson, like I have a special set of skills, but as an adventure racer and as a hunter, I knew there's these windmill towers off to the northeast and with all the red blinking lights. And I told him, I was like, I know my buddy will go to that. He's a big time hunter and has lifetime hunter. And I was like, I know, given he has no other way to know anything, that's where he's going to go. He's going to head on that bearing. I was like, I would like to help. And they were like, no, we don't need one more person getting lost. And I was just like, again, I didn't want to sound like a weirdo. So I was like, okay. So I ended up going back to the boat ramp and I went at least dropped off the boat because they wouldn't let me go in that whole area. This was a giant area where these guys were lost. And they kept, even once I came back, which was, as soon as I dropped the boat off, I came back with safety gear and backpack loaded full of everything, water and headlamps and everything. I mean, I was ready to be out there as long as it was going to take. But when I got back there, they had a cop that stayed with me and we had drones. We had a thermal scope truck, which is basically a truck with a giant pole with a thermal mounted on the top of it that went up really high in the air so they could scan. And then they had a thermal drones in the air. They couldn't get a chopper out because it was too dangerous in the storm. But at sunrise, they had a border patrol blimp that was going to be going in the air. Had all kinds of fancy optics, and the storm was supposed to die at sunrise, and so they were going to have that up. So we had a lot of good stuff like that we knew that was either in process or was going to be shortly in process. And then again, we had an incredible amount of boots on the ground. For the park rangers from American side and the Mexican side, and And gosh, it's still funny talking about it. So it still gets me emotional thinking about it. But yeah, then police, search and rescue, volunteers, horseback. It was crazy the amount of
Wow.
people. But yeah, so then I remember these guys gave me like a burger or something. Like, you need to eat some food and just chill out. We're gonna find them. And so, and I was actually calm, the whole time until I knew the dogs would find them. And so once they got the dogs there, it was like 3 a.m. and one of the cops was like, "Hey, just so you know, dogs are on the ground, or they're in the boat, and they'll be on the ground in about 45 minutes, and they're they'll find them." I was like, "Cool." I was just waiting patiently for that, and meanwhile, where I was parked and where they found me is that I was parked where I was going to go in to look for them, and so I'll come back to that. But I marked where I lost them, and I marked where the towers were on Google Maps before I left my original spot. And I knew my entry point was right where I was, and in this big long road. So I set up there. Well, about 3:45 or 4, somewhere in there, he comes over. And mind you, I had to call my wife at this point, like, already, and let her know, like, hey,
Right.
they're probably fine, but they may be lost. So that was kind of a wild experience in itself. And but she was super supportive as much as you can be in that circumstance in the middle of the night. But yeah, like 4 o'clock, he comes back over, roughly, and he said, "Hey, I have news." And I'm like, but he didn't say it very positively. I'm like, "Well, what
Mm,
exactly?" And he's like, "Well, I hate to say it, but the dogs didn't find a sign. They didn't find a track." And I was like, "Well,
too
what kind
much
of
rain.
dogs are these exactly?" And I'm like, "Are they actually human tracking dogs? Or are they like drug dogs that kind of sniff out people?" And he's like, "No, no." He's like, "This is what they do." And I'm like, "But are they good dogs?" And he's like, "They're the best. They came from Laredo, which was like 90 minutes away, which is what took them so long to get there." And I was like, "Ah, man." And that's the first time I did kind of break down and cry for a little while. But after that, I was like, "All right, well, what's the next plan?" And they said, "At sunrise, we're getting the blimp up. We're working on a chopper." And all along, they said that one of the problems that can happen in that area is that there's a lot of oil wells and hunting leases with cabins and blinds and everything. And given that these guys were on foot with nothing, they said that they could get up in one of those, and then they'd be hidden from thermals,
Yeah.
and which was the case. And so that's why where the thermals didn't find them that night. Well, so then about 5 a.m. they left me, and they're like, "Don't go anywhere." I'm like, "All right, cool." And I didn't go on a private property as they asked, but what I did do is there was this big long road. I think it was called the Y Road or something, and it was like 14 miles long or something. And I just went down with binoculars, and every time I saw a long stretch of road, I knew with the angle they would come across, it would be extremely probable that they would hit this road and go into the windmills. And I didn't figure they'd made it all the way out that night because it was quite a ways. And so it turns out that they hiked until about 3:45, or about 3 or 4 in the morning is when they were assuming. They didn't have anything, but they were assuming it was about that, and they found a metal building out there, and in this metal building had a water spigot, and and they found a water bottle that they got some water from the spigot, and they slept under the metal awning in front of the building. And that's where, again, they were I mean, granted, they were scanning a giant area. I mean, you're talking probably 100 square miles that they were trying to cover, with drones and dogs and people and horseback and ATVs and all this stuff. But that being said, that's what they were doing. And then at sunrise, they came out and they started walking down the road. And meanwhile, I'm going down this big road. And I'm just glassing and glassing and glassing. And I think it was about 7 a.m. I come over this hill and I'm like, like, there they are right in front of me. I come, hauling ass up the road when I saw them. And when I pulled up there, I remember my buddy Jay, he's like, "You're dead." I'm like, "No, I'm not dead. I'm alive." He's like, "No, no, we saw you die." And I was like, "No, man, I'm totally fine." He was like, well, what happened?" I'm like, "Well, so I'm across." I'm like, "I mean, I flipped over once to catch my breath, but..." He's like, "No, no, we saw you go down." And I told Jax, I'm like, "Dude, you really think I died?" I'm like, I'm a good swimmer." And he's like, "I gave you a 40-60 chance, Dad." I'm like, "Really?" I'll never forget that. I'm like, "I'm 40-60 chance of all the things I've done." Yeah, it ended up being obviously a great rekindling. And we briefly told each other our stories. And then I called the lead ranger on it, and I was like, "Hey, I got him." And he's like, "What do you mean you have him?" He was kind of I these guys, I'll give them a huge break because I know they're dealing with bad guys a lot, and that's
Yeah.
what is a
Yeah.
major problem. And so I'm sure he suspected there could have been foul play, as he should have assumed, I'm sure the story seemed wild. And so I can imagine why he kind of had the attitude. And I always felt like they did keep me at a bit of a distance because it was probably suspect. Like, okay, you swam across this giant cove for hours and you rescued your boat yourself and then you called us and then they vanished. Like that all seems really weird. And I
Yeah.
get it. And so I totally can understand from his perspective of where he was. But then when I called him, he's like, I need you to come over here right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And then he even called me back like within 4 minutes or 5 minutes because we just couldn't believe what had happened. And
Right.
then couldn't believe that I, of all people, found him. And I mean, it was just dumb luck. I mean, look, obviously a plan, but it was also luck. And he's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm coming, I promise. And so we go over there, and as soon as we pull up to the beach where their search and rescue operation was, as soon as I walk up, he just holds up his hand. He's like, yeah, I don't want to hear from you. He's like, I want to hear from you. And so, and my buddy Jay is a great storyteller. The next thing you know, he goes off and telling his story for the next hour or whatever it was. And everything was great. And then just in concluding the story, so yeah, I mean, we were so thankful to everybody that did everything. And I didn't even know like how that stuff works. I'm like, what do I owe you guys? I'm like, I'm sure this was expensive, but at this point, I was like ready to sign over my house, right? I mean, I was so
Right.
happy that
Yeah.
everything was fine. They're like, oh, it's all in the taxpayer dollar, man. Don't worry. My son got some infection on his face from something out there, and in this small town of Zapata, there wasn't a hospital, and we went to the fire station, and we go to the fire station that morning about 10 or 11 a.m. And as we're in there, this gal, she's like, yeah, I'll help you guys out, and she's like, wait a minute. She's like, are you the guys? And we're like, what do you mean? She's like,
The guys.
are you the guys that were lost? And we're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. She's like, oh my God. She's like, did you know the National Guard was activated to go seine Tiger Cove looking for you? She's like, my boyfriend is the
Whoa.
lead whatever in charge of that side. They were all mounted up. They were going to go seine the cove looking for bodies. And I'm like, well, and then it brought like a whole other side of emotion out. We're like, holy shit.
Wow.
But which maybe explained why, I mean, they obviously had to factor for all scenarios in that case.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So it was one of the wildest stories, and I've had some good ones, but it was really cool. And my biggest worry from everything was going to be the psychological impacts from that, and because it obviously was an insane amount of stress, on my
Sure.
kid and even me, and Jay for that matter. But all of us, we talked about it from this was a bad circumstance, but positive one step forward, perseverance is what got us all out alive, and it all worked out great. And then I told Jackson, like, look, this is crazy and I get it, but you now have literally the coolest adventure story of all time, and we have it together. Like this officially ranked above all of my other stories that I've ever had,
Wow.
and everything worked out. And since he is he's continued to be an incredible athlete and doing all kinds of crazy things. And we actually went out the next day. Oh, he took the day off, and then we did go out the last day, and we finally got our giant fish on that very last day. Everything worked out like a story. So it was incredible experience, but yeah, frightening all the way around.
Mm. We're out of time, but one thing that I have to bring up here, the trained professionals are
Hmm.
just that, and they're
Yeah,
good, and I'm so thankful for them.
yeah,
But you know what happens is the first rule of search and rescue is don't endanger yourself,
hmm
which as a dad you were willing to do.
sure, yeah, without
You know
thought.
what I mean? Sometimes the lay people, the civilians, whatever you want to call sometimes they do have great skills, especially someone like you who's done all the adventure racing and has the athletic ability to just go and do. And sometimes it works out that,
Yeah,
you know, you're the one who found them.
yeah,
I don't have a way to say what's right or what's wrong there. I think if you come down on either side of that coin, like, oh, you should not look, you should let the authorities take care of it, you're right. If you
yeah,
say, oh, no, I'm going to look, that's my son and I have the skills, I think you're right.
you're right.
So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a
I mean, it's
crazy
something that,
decision. It's a
yeah,
crazy decision.
it is. Yeah, and I think that for me just to put on a backpack and just go hoofing it across the desert, would that have made any sense? No. But again, I deployed a plan, and
And it
it
worked.
was and it worked, right? And I can definitely see how getting another body lost out there wouldn't help. And so
No,
I
no,
totally
no.
understand that. But I think one of the most important messages, and the whole reason I mean, obviously it was a great story, and I didn't want to forget the details, so I wrote it shortly after I got home. But one of the biggest messages I want anybody to take away from it, that I bet a lot of people don't necessarily think about, is if your boat ever blows off the shore, put an anchor down. Like we went back the following year fishing again. We anchored the shit out of that thing when we freaking pulled the boat on. But if the boat blows off, you should let it blow off. We were only home a week or two in our local lake, Granger Lake. Same circumstance happened to a guy, and they didn't find him until they seined the lake and found him. He died.
Wow.
It just goes to show, I could have got caught. And then the Rangers actually did tell me, they're like, hey, just so you know, when we were scanning that cove, we found an illegal gill net out there, only slightly off your course. And if you would have got entangled in that, you would have died, which is true. I probably would have got entangled in it, big heavy hooks or something, and it just would have been a crappy way to drown. And so there was things like that I didn't consider. But there is a whole bunch of illegal fishing that happens out there, and when they lectured me about that, I was like, all right, that's fair. I get it, but it happens. So.
Well, Josh, I think there's a lot we can learn from your story, and it's an amazing story. It really is, and I've had so much fun, but we're out of time. So,
yeah, sure, no worries.
Thanks for coming on. By the way, tell people what your business name is so people can hear about that, and then we're gonna have to jump.
Yeah, my business is Orange Mud. We make hydration packs that allow you to go run and ride and do stupid things, but hopefully not that stupid.
Orange Mud, and what is the URL?
Orangemud.com. Orange like the fruit, mud, M-U-D.
Orangemud.com. I love it. Josh, thank you for your time today.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you bet. Great story, man. That's crazy. And for all the listeners out there, be smart. Maybe don't try to outswim the wind chasing your boat. But whatever you do, make sure you do get out there and have some fun.
Exactly.